Here an error is occurring. One second. Narratives. Today we will talk about various interconnected topics. Our first subject centers on the upcoming US elections featuring Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. The electoral race is intensifying with both candidates nearly neck and neck. The outcome will largely hinge on the swing states, namely Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. Additionally, we will explore the implication of this election on the Gaza-Israel conflict. As we have observed, President Biden has struggled to address the issue effectively and have now not been successful in getting a ceasefire. And Vice President Harris has not demonstrated significant enthusiasm regarding it, while she has condemned the losses of innocent Palestinian lives, also condemned the Hamas attack on Israel. On the other side, a spokesperson for Donald Trump asserted uh, President Trump did more for Israel than any American president in history, and he took historic action in the Middle East that created unprecedented peace, the Abrahamic Accord. When President Trump is back in the Oval Office, Israel will once again be protected, Iran will go back to being broke, terrorists will be hunted down, and the bloodshed will end. He also said if elected again, he would bar Gaza residents from entering the US as part of an expanded travel ban. Biden's term has been marked by conflict, a point emphasized by the Trump administration, which claims that had Trump remained in office, the Ukraine Russia conflict would not have occurred. This leads us to our second topic, the BRICS alliance, led by Russian President Vladimir Putin, which is reaching its place where it's perceived as a significant threat to the West. North Korea has also dispatched its troops to support Russia in the Ukraine war, while Iran and Israel are facing their own challenges. The United Nations has been ineffective in mitigating these conflicts, with Israel even banning UNRWA and its assistance to Palestinians. Now, the question is how the next president of United States will influence the situation in the Middle East, the extent to which BRICS will advance, and the future of Gaza-Israel relation. Who would like to talk about this?
Hi to everyone. Today, for this conversation, we've got Mr. Aamir Ghauri, who's basically decided to join us. Thank you very much. I'm just going to bring him onto the screen. So, Aamir Bhai, Assalamu Alaikum. I hope you're fine and well.
Walaikum Assalam, Maham, Aditya.
So, those of you who don't know, Aamir Ghauri is somebody who's got an experience of over 3 decades in covering various journalist positions. Like he's appeared on Al Jazeera, he's appeared on BBC, he's worked for BBC. He's a well-known name when it comes to wartime journalism. And currently, he is basically with a publication called The News, part of the Young Group. He's an editor over there. And we would like to get some insight. So, Aamir Ghauri, you have heard what the introduction was in regards to what the geopolitical situation is with the US elections just about to unfold as a result, and BRICS has just finished. Do you see a shift in the geopolitical system, and how do you think this entire thing is connected? And then when it comes to the US elections, if Harris compared to Trump won the elections, what would be the outcome in regards to that, in terms of impact? Go ahead.
So, Glenn, thank you very much for inviting me to your program. Listen, when this year started, now we are technically coming to the end of the year. So a lot has been written across the world that this was the year of important elections throughout the world. You know, we had elections in India, we had elections in Pakistan, we had elections in Bangladesh, we had elections elsewhere. But you know, finally, everybody was looking uh, towards Washington, D.C. Why? Because it is not going to be a normal election. A former president, Trump, who was not only thrown out, kicked out by the Democrats, and what actually happened after that election and the way he has behaved and faced the legal action, as if an angry politician. You know, we have seen those kind of politicians in third world countries. You know, we were not expecting this kind of attitude from established democracies. But because Trump, the way, if you look at his political background, you know, he was not known as a star candidate of Republican Party. So in 2016, and I was there, I was covering his election campaign against Hillary Clinton when he won. You know, he has first defeated his own party, you know, Republican Party, and then, you know, became the president. Now he actually wants a sort of, you know, this is my take. You may not agree with that. That he's an angry man, angry old man who actually wants to come back and establish two things. That one, you know, a great number of Americans support him. A great number of Americans support his politics, which is primarily without any rules and principles of governance or, you know, state running business. Uh, and he actually wants to establish. Technically, he actually wanted to fight against Biden, who you know, defeated him. But because Biden, his medical condition, the way he started off his campaign, and the way he was, you know, forced to leave the position and bring Kamala Harris, you know, to the center stage. Now, I think this election, because you know, there are important things actually happening in the world, and those regions have hopes and fears of the American politics. You know, the way Washington D.C. behaves with Middle East, with China, with Russia, with certain parts of Europe, in South Asia, in the South China Sea. So everybody actually has or their own opinion and what expectation from this election. Uh, we know that you know, the news which is coming from United States is that this is not going to be an easy election for any of the candidates. You know, be it Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. She started off with a little, you know, lead in the polls, but polls are not to be trusted. You know, we have seen polls completely going bonkers in some of the European elections, and we do not know what actually happens here. Uh, the question, you know, when it comes to Kamala Harris, is again going to be a $1 billion question, not $1 million question, whether America is ready for a woman. And she is not, you know, 100% an American woman. They can say it, but you know, her heritage. This time, you know, he Trump was a bit more cautious. You know, he was pretty lethal against Obama. You know, the kind of things he said about his heritage or whatever. But this time, he's not saying that. Why? Because primarily, you know, the American election this time is not of issues, it is of personalities. You know, he actually wants to come back. So if you look at both the presidents, they are not actually not talking about huge, you know, economic issues or political issues or foreign policy issues or domestic policy issues. Uh, those issues have been thrown in the political game because they have to score a few points. But otherwise, it primarily is whether Trump will come back and win, and if he wins, what he will do, whether he will actually do anything different from what he has done earlier in his earlier or first stint, where he completely sidelined the State Department, and he made not many friends in the Department of Defense. He actually wanted to end the wars, and the hope is if he comes, we will actually kind of discuss in the program if you actually want, further deliberation on this issue. But at the moment, I'm just kind of seeing it. It is not an American relationship. It is Trump versus Kamala Harris, and basically Republicans, Democrats. Both these parties are now clearly showing that they are completely devoid of serious leadership. The quality of leadership is pretty distressing for many people in the world who used to see America as the leader of the democratic world. And now they say that, maybe America is the country which will kill democracy as the way forward of governance. The way I remember in the last millennium or last decade of the last millennium, when Francis Fukuyama wrote his book when Soviet Union broke down, and he wrote his historic book, which is called the End of History and Last Man. That maybe now democracy will be the only uh, system of governance which will last forever. And we challenged at that time, and we saw in the last 20 years that the rise of the Chinese and the rise of the Russians, the way they are coming up, that maybe we are now moving. The large part of the world is moving in a direction where the state or the nation state would be authoritarian, dictatorial, but the economy will be market. So I think it will be seen how America, or the leaders of America, will uh, you know deal with these challenges.
Do you think it will have a different impact in terms of if Harris was to win compared to Trump in on the geopolitical situation in a global from a global perspective?
Kamala Harris as a vice president was pretty limp. We did not kind of see her as a strong vice president, and we saw even Biden not as a very strong president who was taking, very definitive action on some of the issues, and both the issues which were going on now for some time. One is the war between Ukraine and Russia, where the policy was only, Americans and the American allies in Europe. The policy was only that, keep Russia engaged in a war where it will bleed like it bled in Afghanistan. That, the longer the war goes, the longer its, economy will actually suffer. And on the other hand, the war, which is now more than a year old in the Middle East, it will actually have huge impact. But we did not see any, leadership role being presented or being, pressed by either Biden or the president. So I don't know. I think that, if Kamala Harris wins, she will be unable to deliver on these two things, on any of the fronts.
Mm. And you think that if Trump was to win, it will have a different outcome in terms of relations or the emergence as we saw in the BRICS. Do you think China will have a different policy towards Trump compared to Harris, or Russia for that matter, or India?
I think the global politics, the overall in the South, which is called the global South now, and these countries which have now created more than one organizations, uh, they will challenge America and America's influence or the West's influence, collectively. And if you see that, if, for example, the organization like BRICS or SCO, which is now more than half of the world population, predominantly the largest economic blocs, and now technically the largest geopolitical blocs, they're challenging American hegemony in parts of the world. And if, for example, tomorrow Europe, which is in serious economic facing serious economic issues, if Europe opts to be slightly more neutral, because after the Brexit, when United Kingdom left Europe, UK used to be the American voice in Europe. And immediately when America actually wanted to fight war here, there, the UK used to jump on the American ship first. So tomorrow, if Europe, tries to be a little more neutral, because remember, some of the smaller countries in Europe, which are definitely part of the European Union, where Romania and Bulgaria and Slovakia and Serbia, they do not see the American policy in Europe because they're closer to Russia. And that's why, maybe they will also put pressure that, listen, there is no point trying to bring Ukraine into NATO. And similarly, smaller countries, there are very, very small countries, Lithuania, Estonia. Uh, so I personally think that if Europe decides to be slightly more neutral, then the American game will actually have serious implication as far as the world, politics is concerned, because then they actually have only a couple of, larger countries, but not military powers who are a member of the American alliance system, whether it is NATO or whether it's AUKUS or whether it's Quad. So I think, next 5 to 10 years politics will see that America will actually have to find its feet on the ground again if it actually wants to be the leader of the democratic world.
So Amir Saab, do you think, like, the attitude Donald Trump has towards the European partners, which is a more protectionist America, which is America, Donald Trump's America, which talks about settling the conflict in Ukraine, which is basically means that he'll be gifting that, like, occupied land to Russia. Do you think a relationship with Europe under Donald Trump is something that Europe will appreciate, or how do you think they will perceive it?
Ditya, I actually have, a conspiracy theory, and then I have, a general understanding of things, the way people discuss. And, if I try to deal with the latter part first, is that, Europe as a group of 27 countries actually would like to stay on side of the Americans, because if you look at the history, America is a country of immigrants, but now there are not many immigrants who are moving from Europe to America. There are immigrants who are coming from non-European countries, whether they are, Southern American countries or Asian countries. So the demographics are also changing. So the nature of the debate will change in America. The other thing is that I personally think the Americans would like European Union as a bloc to, uh, completely break down. They do not like, and they did not like, the British did not like, the Washington did not like the power of Germany, only a few years ago, when the German Chancellor was running the game in Europe. And that is why, if, for example, tomorrow, if you break the strong bonding between France and Germany and some of their supporters, the larger countries, so they would like, Europe to break back into the smaller states. So tomorrow, if China emerges the way it is emerging, and if some of its supporters will actually have larger interest, let's say in Middle East and Africa, so America will actually see its hegemonic game, seriously challenged. So they would not actually have like your EU as a bloc, going neutral or siding with the Chinese bloc. Why? Because, if you look at the Chinese president's policy, the BRI, they are looking towards Europe and Africa as primarily their markets, and Europe is, is a huge market, almost 500 million people. The way they basically spend money, the way they buy products. So Chinese, would like Europe to be their strong market, and America will not, because America definitely is not producing enough, things for which they would like to see Europe as their market. But if, coming back towards the Middle East, for example, tomorrow, if the Chinese influence and the Indian influence, because if you look at both these countries, they are 1.5 billion country. Both these countries are almost 40% or 35% of the world's population. So the thing is that if India has to progress, to make life livable for all Indians to an acceptable standard, and similarly with China, they would need all the world's oil and gas and steel and minerals, and that's why they will actually see the Middle East as as a place which will connect to the eastern economies. And we have seen, one example for that matter would be, or double example, the Saudis and the Iranians. America can go and say that Iran is under sanctions for the last over 45 years, but Iran is selling oil and gas to India, to China, to Russia, dealing with them, with Turkey, with Azerbaijan. So there is no sanctions as far as Iran is concerned. Similarly, Saudi Arabia tomorrow, if they decide that they would like China to be their biggest partners, so American game, I'm telling you, is seriously challenged. And at that time, that's why I was saying that at this time, if America, as leader of the democracies, because we also actually have hopes here, as in Pakistan or India, because we claim that we are democracies, although our democracies actually have a long distance to cover, but we do not actually want to be like China. We do not actually want to be like Russia. We do not actually want our leaders to be dictators. But if, for example, a president like Trump, who cannot see beyond his nose, he is so, egotistical, and he is a narcissist. He talks about himself, just saying that he will make America great again. He does not actually have a policy or a plan. He's a demagogue. So that's why all these countries which see America as the largest economy and the leader of the democratic world, they see that there will be a non-serious man who does not actually have any inkling of challenging Putin or President Xi, because he will come maximum for 4 years again. The other guys are sitting, they do not actually see any challenge. So they're sitting tight. They might actually see him come and they might see him go. Uh, for countries like us, we have to see, what is there for, for countries like us in Washington, D.C.
So I agree with that, and even the ideas like make America great again is not something new that he came up with. Similar things have been said before by the Nazis, like trying to go back in the time when everything when they were the greats, or even the rhetoric by our Indian BJP government, Narendra Modi, right? The
Hmm.
Hindu Rashtra, like go trying to go back in a time period when we were the greatest civilization, or America, like make America great again, meant that we were once the greatest country. Now look how, like everything is like breaking up, falling apart. And he talks about, like China, look at their airports, look at Middle East, look at their roads, look at what we are doing. It's everything is falling apart. We need to make America great again. I agree with that point and with that understanding. But the second point and the last point on the American election, I would like to discuss with you regarding the internal politics, or the politics that is playing out in America. What do you think are the important uh, points on which both the parties are, do you think, like trying to play out their politics? Like what are the two three most important things that they want people to talk about, or their policies on which they are running their campaign in like Biden versus Harris versus Donald Trump?
Aditya, the five or six issues which are being talked about, I'm not saying that they are issues of the American elections. Most of them are internal. A couple of them are external, and external is, the on foreign policy. The election, an American election will not be a foreign policy driven. Uh, we might actually like to, think for a second that the war between Russia and Ukraine, and the war in the Middle East between Israel and its neighbors might actually kind of impact. the voters' decision. But I personally think the issue, biggest issue remains the economy. And American economy is in serious trouble. I remember, the last time when I was traveling through 5 or 6 these troubled states, like for example, Ohio, which this time is not a swing state, but it is one of the important states, which way it leans. Uh, so all four major towns in Ohio, whether it was Akron or Cincinnati or Columbus, they used to be the world capitals of different products, like the rubber capitals, the biggest tire companies who actually have their head offices, global head offices in these. Now they look like ghost towns. There is no economy of those towns. You go towards the motor town, which is, Michigan, Detroit, the Ford Motor Company and the other car makers, the American car makers. And if you see now the amount, the numbers of suicides, the number of crime, and you know, if you happen to live in those states, you will see, you will think that, I will pick up my bag and go somewhere else, because America for them is not the shining example, or the American dream which we used to actually kind of read about. If you look at the Americans, the states which are on the uh, the seashore, whether it's the eastern seaboard or the western seaboard, towards California or in New York or whatever, Boston, New York, and coming down to Washington, D.C. These are all now historically blue states. They're not red states.
The
Uh,
most progressive, yeah, and
Progressive,
prosperous for
yeah.
at the time, yes.
I actually kind of see it because they allow the healthy intermingling and intermixing of people from the world. They have the best universities, so definitely the best talent from all over the world would come and study there, and then they will find jobs. And that is why when we were talking about the biggest American companies actually have Indians as their CEOs. Not that they were kind of were in love with Indians. India was a bigger market. Technically 450 to 500 million Indians now can spend money. So that is why companies like Mercedes and BMWs were running towards India, setting up their shop there. That if tomorrow, they can sell 100, 200,000 pieces there, they don't need to sell in America or Europe. So that is why what I see is, the economy is the biggest issue, and that is in serious trouble. You cannot now make sure or reverse the process where you have moved your production facilities outside America. That means in the last 30, 40 years, when America moved from the production to service industry, they do not actually have people who will actually work if you want to pull those production units back. Then immigration. Immigration is an issue which normally becomes a bigger issue when economies are down. When economies are progressing, then you will actually hear ideas about multiculturalism, multi-religious, multi-ethnic, healthy mixing of the world people. Professors will tell you the good stories how the Romans and the Greeks and the Indians and the Chinese were contributing to a global order. The books will be written about the new Silk Roads and etc. But when the economy is down, immigration becomes an issue, and that means if, for example, out of 100 people, 20 or 25 people are not of that stock, which is the majority stock. The societal aggression and anger against each other becomes an issue. The law and order becomes an issue. And then the minor issues, whether minor in a sense that I cannot, I don't actually want to say that I'm trying to offend women here, but, issues which are regarding the female health, uh, whether those issues will be pushed by both the candidates, so technically, I think the other issues which are being thrown in the fray are minor issues. They will not impact people. And that is why, Donald Trump is not talking about issues this time. He is more about slogans. And similarly, the woman, she actually wants to continue with the policies by saying is that, listen, we have turned the country around. And But largely, we have seen that the most policies, both parties do not change their global or internal politics or policies.
So I agree with all those points, and another very interesting point, or to the internal politics of United States of America, which is not mentioned a lot of times, is the culture wars happening inside the United States of America. The right talks about it a lot. The woke culture that they talk about, how our society is being uh, ruined by these left wing or these liberal people, and the gender wars, or the pronounce all these ideas. Donald Trump trying to portray Harris as a communist, he's literally trying to portray her as a communist, which she is nothing close to being a communist. The leftist will accuse her of being a like what do you call it, neo-capitalist, or these capitalists, or in a system which is compromised. But that's a separate issue. But from what I know, the culture wars are also very hot in the Americas, because a lot of things that the right wing or the Republicans want to pass as acceptable in the society are put under the guise of these culture wars, because ideas like what do you call it, tax cut for the rich, it's not even very popular among the Republicans. More Republicans reject cutting taxes for the rich than not. And the Democrats overwhelmingly support tax raises for the rich. So but Donald Trump do talk about tax cuts, disguised and in under the ideas that we are also fighting these culture wars. So I think these are also some of the ideas which the Republicans or the right wing talks about. But from what you talked about, I think immigration is at the top, because the second point you mentioned, the economy is not doing that great. So all these ideas come in front when
It's
people
it's
want to
Did you,
blame.
it's fashionable, for the rich and famous people to talk about tax cuts. They actually want to tell, because the voters are not rich. Most of, a large number of voters are, poor people, normal, uh, middle class, lower middle class people. For them, taxes are not issues because they are not in those tax nets. As far as the larger companies and the CEOs or the bankers, they're concerned, they actually have more than one way of hiding their money wherever they can, and they actually have ways and means to evade taxes. They do not actually pay taxes. They have many ways to do it. But whenever there is an election, it becomes an issue that we will tax the rich and this and that. No, it does not actually happen. It has never happened. When I was studying law many years ago, they said the law grinds the poor and rich man rule the law. People who are making laws, they do not actually want those laws applied to them. Similarly, if you spent your whole life trying to make money, how would you give that money away to the state? Because you think that you're entitled to that money, and then you actually hide that money. Otherwise, how would you build your Trump towers and your Rolls Royces and whatever your uh, golf courses and this and that? But if you look at the American economy, the biggest engines of American economy are either the defense, industrial complex, or the oil companies. And in the last 20, 30 years, in the service sector, when the tech companies came up, the Silicon Valley became the fashionable, icon. And we have seen the Microsofts and the Apples becoming the global brands. They are the largest company in the world. But very soon, imagine that Russia, China, and India still cannot compete with the Americans when it comes to producing the high tech defense equipment. But they're seriously challenging the authority and the leadership of America in the tech world. And that is why, companies like Huawei were banned there. America does not, America talks one thing, but it basically acts completely differently. They do not want a healthy, challenge. Tomorrow, if, for example, an Indian tech company creates a challenger to companies like Apple or Microsoft, You will see, the protectionist voices in America would, start talking about those products, that these need to be, taxed, so they should not be allowed, just like, Chinese products. And the biggest issue was the semiconductors. Americans do not actually want their high-end, uh, the tech knowledge to be shared or reverse engineered by the Chinese or the Indians or the Russians. So I think, the challenge whenever is there, the rich guys talk one thing and act differently. Uh, a normal American will not be able to send his, daughter or son to Harvard Medical School or law school or Princeton, those Ivy League universities, or Oxford or Cambridge. So I think these are slogans which become pretty attractive slogans whenever there's election.
I think
I,
to just to add to Shah, just 10 seconds, just to add to that point, the Reagan era trickle down economies has ran out of, like, its fuel, and
Yeah,
from for the working class people, they are no
yeah. It does
longer
not. It does
interested in
not
those
trickle down.
ideas.
It does not trickle down.
Yeah, exactly, because it never trickled down.
It never trickles down.
so in the entire situation, like for example, we've seen how the American corporations and America, in terms of having that hegemony, which it's been boasting about. Uh, do you think it is acting as a almost like a protectionist state at this moment in time? Like just in the last week or so, after the BRICS summit. Uh, they've imposed sanctions on various organizations. It seems like if BRICS is anything to go by, and alienation is to have some kind of an effect, Russia would have been in a very different situation. But it seemed in the BRICS summit as a whole that Russia basically Putin was surrounded by emerging powers.
So, Glenn, in the 90s, when I went to study abroad in the West, the most of the theses in American universities were being written about international politics, how to stop the Japanization of American economy. Why? Because Japanese car companies had set up shops in America. The Toyota and Nissan and all these car companies, which are compact, which were technologically more advanced than those gas guzzler machines which America was producing, in shapes of Chrysler and Oldsmobiles. So what actually happened was America said that, listen, Japan, we actually want Japan on our side, but technically, no to their industries, because they're taking our jobs, they're taking our industry away, they're killing our industry. Now, exactly like that. Tomorrow, if, for example, the Chinese companies, which are now coming up pretty strong, I'll give you just one comparison. Compare BYD with Tesla. You know, look at the Tesla's price and the BYD's price. And if tomorrow BYD kind of starts, landing in Europe, who will actually buy a Tesla? £100,000 car versus, a £42,000 car. So I'm telling you, they will basically stop, high end. But if I do not actually have that money, I might actually like Tesla, I might like a Mercedes. But if I do not have the pocket, I will definitely go for the cheaper models, but which are technologically comparative. So you talk about open markets, but then you close your borders to challenge, and the challenge would definitely come from primarily from China, then from India, because it is a growing, very fast growing economy, and Russia, not in that sense. But if tomorrow Russia, because to fight a war, Russia is selling its gas to Europe. So if it actually shuts its gas pipelines to Germany and France, I'm telling you, this winter or last winter, you know, you live in, partly, Glenn, in England, and I live in England. The gas and electricity bills have gone 500 times. People who are considering themselves as, easygoing middle class or slightly upper middle class, from £40 to £60 per month gas bill has gone to £500. So technically, if you're earning £2,000 per month, how would you basically give 25% in just one? commodity bill. So when it comes to competing technologically, when these economies will move, you mentioned BRICS. BRICS at the moment, started off just like SEO, regional economic and connectivity cooperation councils. Tomorrow, if they decide that, listen, actually we actually want to be a defense organization as well, and we will apply the Truman Doctrine, like in 1823 when the Americans said that Southern America is our backyard, and we will not allow anybody to come here and set up shop, whether it's defense shop or it's the trading shop. So tomorrow, China can actually kind of say it in the Indian Ocean, or India can say in the Indian Ocean, thank you very much. This is our sphere of influence. You please stay away. And if tomorrow, let's say, I'm giving you a very interesting scenario. Tomorrow means in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, if China and Russia and India come to an understanding with the Middle Eastern oil and gas producers that, listen, we can deal with you, we can trade with you in non-dollar denomination currencies, America will die. America will be 8,000 or 6,000 miles away country where nobody will go. We have seen after the 9/11, the number of students who actually wanted to go and study in America, fell. Why? Because they were treating the rest of the world as inferior, as not comparative. And, you cannot say that a small yard and higher walls, you cannot kind of build, listen, we will kind of build walls. You cannot live inside a castle, because castles, we have seen historically, are either broken down or they're defeated. So America, whatever, that's what I'm saying, that if America grew in the last 200 years by being open to the world, you know, because it was a country of immigrants. All those migrants who went and studied in the university, the best minds, and then they worked there, they created and they developed that country. You shut that country, but using this rules or that rules, this argument or that argument. And do you think that this old man, called Trump, will actually have? He does not. What frightens me is he does not have any forward-looking plan for the Americans. Forget about the world.
I think that's a very interesting comment, but when that's something which a lot of people are basically pointing out,
I
that
have
not
have
only
something
does
to say here. Yes.
Yeah, please.
yeah, go ahead.
So my question is, okay, so I mean, it's just a rhetorical question. So since 90s, majority of the wars, especially in Muslim wars, were, waged by America. So if America economy is going down, isn't that a good thing for all those Muslim countries? Like I start listing, there are so many. There are 15,000 sanctions by the US on all the countries who are left behind because of those sanctions. Like the second, I think the second most sanctions are by EU, and that's 5,000, and US has the most sanctions of 15,000. So even if
But
America is going through a downfall, isn't it a good thing for the rest of the world?
in one way, yes, because if an American economy is down, but they find very interesting ways. There was a recent report on the front pages of Financial Times that the American defense industry is hoping for bumper deals in coming years. So we were discussing that, are they planning new wars? You know, because when you sell guns and weapons, you do not actually want those guns and weapons to be sold and then kept in in the cupboard. No, you actually want those weapons to be used, so that they're used and destroyed, so that you can send buy sell more. It's just like every 6 months Apple comes up with a new model, whether it's Pro and 15 Pro and Max Pro and whatever, technology
Max.
does not change. So just like, who will get their Raptors, and who will get their F-35s, and who will get their, guns and weapons and drones. But yes, you will actually have to see, it's not just the Muslim countries. America will not like Saudi Arabia, which does not have, by the way, does not have an army, so it cannot fight. The country has been devised, and it is being run in a way that nobody will attack Saudi Arabia. And that's why they do not have a territorial army. They have a national guards which protects its royal family from its own people. Similarly, UAE does not have an army. Similarly, Kuwait does not have an army. So all these oil producing countries are kept on a leash, an American leash that, listen, if you actually want to be surviving and build these skyscrapers, create, Hollywood like, sets, models, Dubai and etc. So be on our side. Otherwise, just a couple of terrorist attacks and your economy will be gone. So the attacks in Muslim countries, uh, I don't think that they will end because Israel will not end these wars. There is an idea which
It's
I
not
think you
just the
must.
Muslim countries, though. It's not just the
Uh,
Muslim countries like Vietnam and a lot of these countries. They were not Muslim. It's
they were not
always
Muslim,
like
but
this trade of.
yeah,
Mm,
listen, then we can kind of go for an endless debate. When after the Second World War, America created an enemy. Communists were the enemies. So anybody who was close to China and Russia or where it was their camp, they were enemies.
mm,
And that's why America, unlike the former colonial powers like France and Britain and Spain, they did not kind of go into countries and controlled them, looted them, but also developed them in certain ways. Like, for example, give you an example. In case of India, India was 560 princely states. Now, the British, what they did was when they took control from the Mughals, they did two or three basic things. One, they laid down the railways. They created the land reforms by creating the settlement system. They built, the dams and dug canals, whatever. Why? Because they had a long-term plan. America does not have long-term plan. America has been destroying countries. So whether it was Cuba or Vietnam or Korea or Afghanistan or Iraq or Iran or Yemen, that is what it does. And if they do not do it directly, then they use their proxies. Like for example, they use Pakistan to fight, a war in Afghanistan against Soviet Union and broke that country down.
Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
So I think if
mm-hmm.
America, whoever wins there, I would like their ability to fight wars, diminished because Chinese and Russians, they might be kind of talking tough, but they normally have not attacked other countries, on their own, like America in the last, 60, 70 years. We have not seen China go and attack a neighboring country. Soviet Union, when it was Soviet Union, it controlled half of Europe. But since it became Russia, it only said to Americans that, listen, we don't actually want to fight anymore after they had learned the lesson, very harsh lesson in Afghanistan. The country fought a war for 10 years and then broke down. 14 countries came out of Soviet Republic. So all those countries, Americans actually want most of those countries to go back and join NATO, which was primarily part of the former bloc, which was called the Warsaw Pact. And Russia said that, listen, you cannot come on our borders and think that you actually want peace with us. And that was the reason that they said that Ukraine cannot go. Ukraine was supposed to be a buffer state, just like Poland. So I wish America, start focusing on its own, start rebuilding, and I would like America to remain because some of the best research is being done in America. I'm sure that I don't know how artificial intelligence will change the world, but America still
He
remains
can
the
always shift
big.
them to Canada. He can always shift them to Canada.
Canada will take 100 years becoming, yeah.
So just like pitching in, I would like to ask if the United States was to go down in the way both of you have kind of agreed. What is the alternative? Do you actually believe that for example, a lot of people have been talking about dollar not being the international mode of exchange in the coming future, or these countries basically shifting to their local currencies or developing new payment methods. But would you would we really want a kind of globe which is dominated by China or Russia in terms of the systems? Is that not an alien kind of a structure for the rest of the world at this moment in time? We don't really know much
I,
about it.
I think, Saklan, your answer lies in your question. Uh, Russia and China were not colonial powers. You know, colonial powers were Europeans, and the modern colonial power in a different way, because you actually have to understand that from after the uh, let's say when the world finally decided that we do not want empires and we want nation states, and the governance model became smaller and more manageable. uh, so in the last 200 years, we have seen that your question was that the model would, whether we would kind of like a Chinese or the Russian model. No, we have seen that after the Second World War, these countries did not expanded geographically. What actually happened is that what we know as during the Cold War, the imperialism changed its face. It was no longer physical imperialism. You do not just gonna go and conquer countries. So the first form which was changed was the economic imperialism. And the dollar was the main face of that economic imperialism. That we were not buying things. We means this part of the world was not buying American like crockery or American biscuits or American clothes or whatever, but the international trade was being done in dollar. Why? Because Europe destroyed itself during the two major world wars. America was 4,000 miles away from Europe, and that's why it was connected by, because most of the Americans were European migrants, so that's why they helped them. But thing is, from 1950 onwards, when the Bretton Woods institutions was created, like the World Bank and the IMF, so American banks and the American economy started giving out loans to rest of the world, saying that we will create, and we will not only create prosperity in your countries, but we will also create jobs and stand up your economies. It did not. Because if you kind of read John Perkins' book, The Economic Hitman, in the last 40 years, what they did was they created specialized bankers who will go into countries and basically sell them ideas that, listen, you need the largest dams and the motorways and whatever. Those poor countries did not need that. Why? Just to lump them in international loans. So, if, for example, when after physical imperialism, the financial imperialism, then we saw the cultural imperialism, the Hollywood. So everything which was American became the world standard. The fashion, whether you're wearing a Ralph Lauren polo or not, whether you're wearing a jeans. Europeans were not actually wearing jeans; they were actually wearing ties, suits, whatever. They changed it. Europeans, being the rich, tea, whatever, they changed it to coffees and whatever. So they changed the culture and the way things. People used to just sit on the table and with the knife and fork for their lunch and dinners. No, they said burgers. You just go into the shop, pick up a burger. You street munching on streets like animals. So that in the last 40 years we have seen that. The thing is, the American imperialism, whether it was physical, cultural, or economic, is now seriously being challenged by these countries which are not interested in physical imperialism, because that model has failed. So if America or American professors are talking about the Chinese will, oh my God, they will take it. No, they will not. They actually want your markets. They want, if you have $10 in your pocket, the Chinese would like four of those dollars, given to them. And what they're doing is that, listen, we are producing things which you would need at a cheaper price, but you cannot pay dollars. Thank you very much. You buy from us, you pay us in, RMB. So, if, for example, more and more Asian countries, because there are now people are kind of talking about, how continents are different, because Europe and Asia are contiguous. They are not separate by sea like the America is. So technically, Russia is part of Europe, just like Turkey is part of Europe and Asia. So if, for example, all these people start buying in bilateral currencies, you know, if I'm buying oil from Saudi and paying them back in real, so technically I would not actually have to, have tons of dollars in my banks. No, I just need rupees or reals. I need RMBs. I want rubles. I need dinars. With the Americans, I'm not buying defense equipment, so I will not actually do the dealing in dollars. So technically, the countries will actually have to think, use their head to get out this debt, which American economies have created for smaller countries, and that is why the idea is like plastic money. You have a credit card, thank you very much, spend it. And when you used to work for a financial company in England, and technically, all these people used to say that, listen, we have three kinds of customers. If you give a credit card, one who has keep a credit card in the pocket never spends it. We don't like them. One which take
That's
the card.
interesting what you've said, but my question. Sorry, I thought you finished.
No,
So
no, it's
once
okay.
you finish, okay, sorry, but so in the past 10 years or so, a lot of people used to basically suggest that China is not imperialistic or a country which might conduct any kind of physical or any kind of warmongering. But the situation is like we've got Taiwan and we see their naval ships and their artillery and them building up an army. It's not for no reason if you think about it. And it would be some interesting insight on your part. Like, for example, in recent times, we've seen escalation from the Chinese in terms of their presence in the Middle East, South of America, in the African regions, and also in parts of the South China Sea, obviously, where they're concentrated the most. So, who is to say that they're just waiting for the right time?
Uh, Again, listen, China has the two largest borders. Either one is with India, the other is with Russia. Hmm? Now, I'll give you an example. The India-China border, which is McMahon Line, is many thousand miles long, and both countries have agreed that on that border, if their border troops have to fight, they will not fire a bullet. Hmm? Now, which two countries in the world have that sort of agreement that, listen, our fighters, our soldiers will fight with bamboos and stones? They will not fire a bullet.
Uh,
Why? Yeah, this is the agreement between China and India. Hmm? So in the last 5 years, they had
Yeah, of course.
couple of serious skirmishes in Galwan and close to the eastern side, past Assam and whatever. The fighters actually fought with dande sote. Hmm? That actually does not happen. So you do not need to
they've
fight
made
wars.
India have made electric trident for that these days.
No, no, means but when I sit with my Indian friends, I said, listen, why don't you have a similar agreement with us on the line of control in Kashmir that we will not fight, with guns and bullets. We will fight with sticks and stones. But
Might turn it into Bhangra or
yeah,
Dandiya
but
type
yeah,
of thing.
exactly. Who can sing better? Uh, and tomorrow these but to deal with specifically with Glen's question. Listen, Taiwan used to be part of China, and that's why China said that. Listen, it was taken away from us, just like Hong Kong when the British was strong. After 100 years, Hong Kong actually kind of went back, and China hopes that one day Taiwan. That is not for me to decide whether it goes or not, but the thing is, Americans actually have their bases, in Indian Ocean, in the Gugarshia. and they don't actually want to abandon that. So technically, when the world's becoming powerful uh, states, they show their power in different ways. China is saying that, listen, whatever was ours, we will take it back. Not tomorrow, not day after tomorrow, someday. America actually wants to, after, as long as Soviet Union was their biggest enemy, they were busy with them. And once Soviet Union broke down, Russia is an enemy. Similarly, smaller Muslim countries like Iran, who do not actually want to deal with Americans, become enemy. But it has been, throughout the history, a powerful country wants to create a challenge for itself. Why? Because philosophers said that, if there is no challenge, then your ability to respond recedes. And that is why America has now declared that China is the new enemy. You know, imagine the biggest economic relationship at this time in the world is between America and China.
Yeah,
Hmm?
of course. So
And
those
also the
people who are
largest rivalry.
basically hold on a minute. So those people who are basically suggesting that we're entering a situation where there is going to be a multipolar world. People are dividing regions into spheres. There's a so-called Anglo-sphere. There are the Europeans. There's the Chinese and the Russian sphere. Do you see that occurring in relation to like in the coming near future?
In a big way, in a big way. Listen, Saklan, 200 years ago, the biggest economies in the world were China and India. You know,
Mm,
And that is why these small European states, which were now developing at that time, changing, the modes of warfare because they were busy in warfare after the French Revolution. And that is why, because they were, fighting every 5 years, 10 years, 5 years, 10 years. So that fighting among themselves necessitated that their fighting ability is modernized, and that's why we saw the industrial revolution there. Imagine, the Dutch and the British and the Portuguese and the Spanish came to India for what?
mm.
For spices.
For spices, yeah.
Four spices, three in
So
India, one in
if
Indonesia.
that is the case, then do you see? Uh, Sorry, you cut off. So
No,
my question, next question would be that if for example, this is where we're headed, then where exactly do countries like India lie? Because India happens to be in a very interesting position right now. It seems like so far they've played both sides, but if for how much longer can they do that? Another country which comes to mind is a country of our origin, not Aditya's origin. We've already spoken about that, but Pakistan, for example. Again, it's interesting that we seem to be right in the middle when it comes to Pakistan, where it seems like that there is a tilt towards the United States at this point in time, and all the regime changes which India and all these other countries have been talking about. We've seen a pro-American government not just emerge in Bangladesh, but other countries. For example, we have Africa, where not only South Africa and Ethiopia are kind of favoring the Russian stroke Chinese political system, but we've got countries like Atrisha and Atria who are basically being backed by United States all of a sudden. So we going to see a snowball effect, and in those regards in the coming months or so, or is this going to slow down?
not exactly coming months, Saklan, but in coming years. Let me just deal with India first. India is, a huge country. It does not need to tilt this or that way. You know, Countries with 1.5, it is now the largest country in terms of the numbers of humans who live in India. So India is in a better position to balance itself between Washington and Moscow and Beijing. If you look, we've heard a lot about America propping India against China. Well, how can that be if, for example, the two-way trade between Beijing and New Delhi is now 120 billion? Hmm? Now, where this trade is not coming through Himalayas. This trade is coming through, the sea, the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. Thing is, if, for example, because of the recent history, recent means 50 years, India might actually at times feel boxed or might actually kind of sell this idea of being boxed by three or at least 2.5 nuclear states. Why? China is sitting all on India's head. And then there's a Pakistan, which is a nuclear country, which has fought wars with India. That's why animosity. But Pakistan is in no comparison to India. Pakistan is not, as powerful, as strong as India is. We had to kind of accept that. Bangladesh has just gone out of the Indian pocket. You know, the way Hasina Wajid, the way she ran, you know, India lost its only friend in the region. India can change its policy tomorrow, you know, because India does not actually want to fight wars. It actually wants to have a relationship. So tomorrow, if, for example, I give you a scenario that if tomorrow Pakistan and India decide that they actually would open up their borders with each other, and Pakistan can actually kind of offer that, listen, because we are geographically a long country, and we're talking about the CPAC, which is a China Pakistan economic corridor, through which China actually wants to connect to the Arabian Ocean because they're actually hoping that their oil and gas would come and the trade would come to Gwadar and then from there to south and western part of China, because there is a mindset in China that their east and north is now very advanced. So tomorrow, politically, India, China's enemies can use this thing that its south and its west are not treated at par with the east or the north. So if Pakistan is saying that part of the BRI, the CPAC route, will connect China to Indian Ocean, tomorrow there is a situation that Pakistan can actually offer two alternative routes, saying that Pakistan will connect South Asia, primarily India and Bangladesh, to Middle East, roads going via Pakistan between connecting Iran and India and by the Middle East. And then Pakistan can actually offer the second route. The roads are already there. The infrastructure is already built. It is just come to a conclusion. Recently, when I went to India via, Wagah border, they have built, the terminals are built to a level where they actually see the hundreds of trucks would move between Central Asia and India via Pakistan. And Pakistan then can earn 8 to 12 billion dollars only from offering their road networks and basically charging the toll on these roads. So technically, one vertical road and two horizontal roads, Pakistan will not need. This is my idea. I've discussed it with the Prime Minister's team here as well. That Pakistan will not need money from IMF and World Bank. If you're earning $10 billion from only this, and then the trade opens, that means the trade between these countries will also flourish. Now, coming to your Africa thing, the thing is, Africa, nobody discusses that Africa is not just a continent, it's 54 countries. If you look at the North Africa, America has destroyed two of their countries completely and divided the countries, when it suited their foreign policy. They broke Sudan into Sudan and South Sudan because of the oil. Egypt is a subservient country, a huge country, is not allowed to, operate an independent foreign policy. Libya, which was a net zero, debt country, it was a rich country, destroyed, oil looted. Tunisia, Morocco is the only country which was, given a reprieve. Why? Because it's too close to Gibraltar and Spain, and that is why the North Africa is destroyed by the Western forces. So if China is entering into the Central Africa and the Southern Africa, and some of the pockets are supported by Russians and whatever, they're not even thinking of fighting wars. This is my idea because I have traveled through these countries. They're looking at these countries as, and they do not, assign different conditionalities that, listen, we will give you money if you become a democracy. No. Chinese said that you ask, what do you usually want built? Roads, bridges, ports, whatever. They actually want their economies in control. Hmm? So tomorrow, if, for example, all the people are dealing and buying Chinese things, why would China actually kind of attack those countries and conquer them? Why would they destroy their own markets? It is completely different model from the war model which was being pushed by the Americans and the Europeans. So I do not see that tomorrow China, uh, never in history, China has attacked India, for example. Why would China attack India now? Hmm? Why would attack? On the other side is Russia. They are partners. With the Central Asian states, they're building roads, and why would they conquer them when they're actually kind of basically using them as markets through billions, spending billions. China is the only country which is running around the world with bucket full of dollars, going to country after country that, listen, what do you actually want from us? Why? What America used to actually basically enslave all these countries through their Bretton Woods institutions. China is doing it directly. Offering them a development model where they will develop those countries so they become their markets.
Interesting. So again, even though that is the situation, and I understand from the Chinese perspective, but do you think the United States is going to let go of their hegemony in such and let this entire thing smooth sail? And if not, just in the last year and a half, what we've seen is a war spring up of course, between Russia and Ukraine. We've got a situation between Gaza, Iran, and Israel, and United States kind of wholeheartedly supporting that. We've got situations developing with Turkey. It seems like if even if there is a hand of change, like you're basically saying, I do not think, at least I would be curious to know how the United States and certain European countries who've been used to having that supremacy for over 70 odd years let go of this in such a quick way, or so easily without putting up a fight. And with that, we're going to go for a close after you've answered as well. So we've done
I
our.
don't think it will be.
Go ahead.
I don't think it will be a quick affair. It may take decades. But thing is that at the moment, the biggest product which China is trying to sell is the BRI. The Belt and Road Initiative. Now, Belt and Road Initiative, you have to understand, are six different routes, running through different parts of the world. Some routes are, running between China and Far Eastern countries going down to Indian Ocean. Then one route is running through India and Bangladesh going into Indian Ocean. One proposed is running through Pakistan. The next one is via Afghanistan, Iran, coming down to Persian Gulf. And then the rail links between running through Central Asia, going to Europe, and going beyond that. So the thing is, not in the next few decades, but the tensions, superpowers do not you know, cripple the way Russia crippled itself by going into a stupid war. Chinese are for 5,000 years is a living civilization. You know, and that is why you need to see when President Xi became power and came into power, he went into now very insignificant countries. And somebody actually asked him, I said, why you actually went to Greece and then Italy and Istanbul and India? And he said, listen, we are not a state, we are a civilization. And that is why I went to recreate the relationship between the civilizations. India was a civilization. Persia was a civilization. Turkey was a civilization, Ottoman Empire. Italy was a civilization, the Roman Empire. Greek, was is similarly a civilization. So they said that, listen, we actually want to live with these people the way we have lived. I'll give you just one example before we pack up this program. I was in Baku recently, and I was running through the city, and then I came upon a caravanserai, which was almost 700 years old. And on the door of the caravanserai, it was written Multani Sarai. And I was amazed. I said, 700 years ago, what was Multan producing in numbers that the horses and the mules and the donkeys would travel? So many caravans that they actually had a caravanserai in their name, in Azerbaijan. And the thing is, these routes, which are the Silk routes, if you actually read the history, and now the Europeans are writing about William Dalrymple is, in love with this, then Anita Anand is in love with this thing. The thing is, these countries did not, and the civilization did not conquer each other. They worked with each other, you know, and that is why, with the last, lighter comment, so Glenn, when I was giving a talk in Fletcher School of Diplomacy in America, and similar question. I said, listen, we do not teach our sons and daughters stories about once upon a time there was a president, or once upon a time there was no. The stories are still once upon a time there was a king, and he had a daughter and a son, or whatever, the prince and princesses. That's why the Hollywood is still making films about Aladdin or whatever. The thing is, those civilizations have lived with each other, traded with each other. If you have something, trade. If you do not, up your skill. The thing is, American model was of destruction of other countries. Destruction, why? Because they were completely angry people who ran from Europe and created a new country. And then, because it allowed the free, what you say, free reign to the mind, and they became a superpower. And in the last 100 years, the progression they have made, I think they need, if they actually want to work with the world, they will actually have to change the way they have been dealing with the world. Otherwise, the challenge, you know, will become bigger, and then soon these countries will gang up and they will block Americans. It might not actually happen in our lifetime, but it actually happened in the past where a brutal state or a superpower has been broken down. The Latinos, the way are picking up, anger in America. There is a movement already being spoken about in California, which they actually want. They're thinking in their independent state. Similar movement is very small, but people are talking about those things in the southern parts of United States. Why? Because they think that America, which is the rich America, is not you know dealing with them or treating them apart. And maybe we do not know what actually happened to the America.
Interesting. With that, if anyone has any final questions to ask, please go ahead. Otherwise, we're going to go for a close. And I would like to also make a small announcement that from next week, we're going to have further shows in elaboration to this current subject. Obviously, the US elections are going to have a result by then. We're going to see a lot of other developments come in. So please consider this to be a pretty regular thing every Sunday, where we're hopefully going to see a lot more of Aamir Ghauri, Mr. Aamir Ghauri. Thank you very much for being here from
Thank,
my part.
thank,
Thanks a lot. It's
thank,
always a
thank,
pleasure.
thank, thank you for inviting me, Mr. Glenn. Thank you. And thank you, Adita, and thank you, ma'am, for listening to my long rants.
No, that was a very insightful discussion. At least I learned a lot, especially about your understanding and specifically about the Eastern world politics that you talked about. That was very insightful for me, at least.
Thank you.
What you have a lot of insights about how things are changing in this geopolitical like you know system, and how the East is looking at it, and how China is looking at it. What is happening at the moment? uh Perspective was very interesting. Thank you for that, Amir sir.
I
Thank you.
think another interesting thing would be from next week. Should we look at each country and where it's going to be ending up in the geopolitical situation? We can look at India one week, we can look at China, we can look at Russia, we can look at the European countries, some African ones. I think in detail would be interesting thing. What do you guys think?
Why not? Sure. Thank you very much. And can I say goodbye?
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
Okay. Love it. I think it's
Okay.
time to go. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you everyone for listening in. And I'm going to end this program with one statement by Noam Chomsky. He said in a speech in 1990 that if the Nuremberg trials law were applied today, then every post war American president would have been hanged. Think about it. Anyway,
Yes.
thank you for listening in. Subscribe the channel and press the bell button to get regular updates about our new rooms. We'll be discussing politics, current affair, all kind of things on this channel. Have a good day, good evening, and good afternoon wherever you are. Bye bye.
Thank you.